All right, so we've created a chord progression, some drums, an 808 bass line, and a melody on top. It's time to do some mixing and arrange this beat into some form of a final product. Now, I'll just do a note here that we're only using 5 tracks. One is the drum kit, one is a hi-hat loop, and oftentimes music has many more layers than just 5. But these categories, chords, percussion drums, bass, and melody, those are relatively the same across most music. Whether or not those parts are played across different instruments in a different assortment of layers, that's another thing. That's for when things start getting more advanced, and you can totally feel free to break free from this, add more melodies on top, add different instruments and percussion layers, of course. But for the purposes of keeping things basic today, let's just understand that these 5 tracks really represent the core part of music that can be expanded into many more layers beyond just these 5. With that said, let's talk a little bit about some mixing things to get the sound just a little bit better. Now, we are slightly limited within Ableton Live Lite, but there are a few key tools here that are very useful, like channel EQ, for instance, which we already used on our synth. I'm going to go ahead and put it on our chords. Let's solo the chords for now. Now, the chord instrument does not really need to have all this extra stuff happening in the lower frequencies, or I don't think it does. So let's go ahead and bring some low frequencies down. And I don't miss much. I might not bring it down so low, but what taking some low frequencies out of sounds that don't actually require it does is it cleans up your mix a lot. It makes room for the bass, and it makes sure that there's no mud happening, because even if we can't hear some of these super low frequencies, they're still affecting our mix. So I'm happy with that. Let's actually throw a channel EQ onto the hi-hat loops as well, because that's another thing that needs literally no low frequencies in it. Let's solo the hi-hat loops. Look at that. You saw that initial hit with a little bump down there. So just to be safe, I'm going to go ahead and throw that low shelf there. And if I wanted to make these hi-hats a little bit brighter, we see that that's where the frequency is hitting. I can even accentuate the highs a little bit. I'm happy with that. Let's hear how that sounds within the mix. I like it. Making it a little bit brighter, getting rid of any extra low frequencies that might have been hiding in there. The next thing I'm going to do is something that I do on a lot of my beats, and it's called sidechain compression. So what that means is I'm going to have everything in the mix reacting to the kick of the drum kit. So let's start by putting it onto our chord instrument. I'm going to go ahead and grab the compressor and drop it onto the chord instrument, expand it out here, and we turn on the sidechain function. We can get audio input from our drum rack, and specifically we want to get the signal from the kick. Now all the other loops are still playing, we just have the chords soloed, so let's play that. You'll see this bar jump every time the kick happens. If I bring this threshold down to say minus 30-ish, we'll start to hear a little bit of a pumping, a little bit of reaction to the kick. And I'm going to bring this dry wet down, just like we talked about with other effects, to maybe 80%, so it's not as extreme. And then I'm going to copy the sidechain compressor. I'm going to put it on everything besides the drums. We don't want the drums ducking under themselves. Even going to put it on the 808, which is controversial, but we'll talk about that in a moment. And I'm going to put it on our lead melody. Now, I said putting it on the 808 was controversial. Not every producer does this. You can do it to taste. Usually what I do is on my 808 or my bass line is I bring that dry wet down to something minimal, like 40%. So it still gets a little bit of that pumping action from the sidechain, but it doesn't take away from the initial hit. Another thing to note here is on the melody, I actually might put this before the reverb. It's that chain that we talked about earlier. I want the melody to sure be sidechain compressed, but I don't want the reverb pumping. I want the reverb to still be floating on. Now let's give it a listen and hear what everything sounds like now that the sidechain compression has been applied. It's a little bit subtle. kick to cut through a lot better. And when everything's reacting to the kick, I just feel like the mix sounds a lot more put together. The next step is to actually start arranging these loops on a timeline. And we haven't even looked at the complete other view of Ableton Live yet. So if this is about to blow your mind, if we hit Tab, now we are in the arrangement view of Ableton Live, which is our timeline view, which if you've used another DAW previously, you'll find familiar. We've got our time running at the bottom. Here's each of our individual tracks that we've been working with. Still got our effects down there. And we're good to go, but how do we get those loops over here? Well, the easiest way that I like to work is by first, let's actually put these into a single row or a scene. So everything that's playing right now, I'm just gonna move down so it's in a single row. This is gonna make moving them a lot easier. And what I can do is click on the loop at the end here, hold Shift, click on the loop at the other end, then I can click and drag, click, hold, and drag. I've got them. I'm hitting Tab, and I'm going to drop them somewhere on this timeline. Ideally, I'm going to drop them somewhere further down the timeline, and I'll show you why in a minute. So there they are. They're in the arrangement view now, but they're grayed out because Live still thinks we want to hear what's happening in session view, but I want to now hear what's going on in arrangement view. So all I need to do is click that orange button. And now at this stage, I'm only going to go back to session view when I'm pulling loops from there. I'm not going to work in session view anymore. So let's figure out how we want to open this track. Let's open it with the chord progression. So I'm going to click my chord progression and drag it to bar 1. I'm also going to drag these little brackets over here that we'll talk about later to make sure they're starting at 1. Now I want to make sure I hit stop. So we're starting to play at bar 1. And I'm going to minimize my library here. Cool. So we've got our chord progression playing here. What you'll notice is we're not going to loop. The timeline keeps moving. So what I would like to do actually is get a simple drum loop, which we built while we were creating these. And here's the simple version. I actually want that to come in before the more advanced drums come in. So let's Command D to duplicate. And I've dropped the simple drum loop here starting at bar 5. Remember, we're working in increments of 4. That is actually going to follow us through this whole beat making process. So the first 4 bars are here. Every 4 bars, we're going to introduce some type of change. So this is another set of 4 bars, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4. So our first 4 bars is just the chords. Our second set of 4 bars, the drums come in. Very simple beat. The next thing, now we've arrived at bar 9. It's time for another set of 4, another pattern. I'm going to keep duplicating, Command D, clicking on a clip and duplicating it. Let's actually have some 808s come in, but we'll get the really simple 808s to come in here. Remember, when we're dragging loops from session view over to arrangement view, it's really important that you don't accidentally put them in the wrong track, or else I could have my lead instrument trying to play this 808 line, which is very, very low. That's not what we want. We actually want this. Cool. And I actually changed my mind. I'm going to have both the drums and the 808 come in here, which means I want something new to happen at 9, which means we're going to drop in this hi-hat loop. But oh no, this hi-hat loop is only 2 bars. That's okay. We can duplicate it same as we have been, and then we can get it to last the full length of 4 bars. You can see that we're doing a gradual build arrangement here, starting with 1 loop and going to 3, building up to 4 layers eventually. Now let's build a new pattern here. Let's have our melody come in for the first time. And let's actually duplicate this drum loop, but I don't want to keep the snare. Or actually, I want to just keep the snare. Let's get rid of the kick. So I'm highlighting all the kicks by pressing that key and then pressing delete. And I'm only doing that for this little loop here. It's not going to affect anything else. So we'll have something like this. let's keep our chords going. So I'm going to click on that loop and hit duplicate. But instead of having the same in the same register, let's select all the notes. And here's another shortcut for you, Shift and up. We'll transpose these notes up a complete octave. Let's keep our 808s here. It's simple 808. Now here at bar 17, I want a nice big drop, so I want everything to start playing. I'm going to copy my original chord progression loop and put that here. I've already got my more advanced drum loop. Let's copy both of these hi-hat loops, selecting them both, Command C, then Command V. Then, oh, we made two melodies. So since we grabbed this one first, let's grab that second melody. Awesome. I might switch those, but let's see how it sounds. We got more advanced 808s here. So we're going to go from our very simple no kick to now that melody's fine, but I think I actually want to switch them. So I'm just going to move this one over here, move this one here, and have this one play during this, what I would call like a pre-chorus section. One thing I'm noticing about these two melodies is that this initial melody has much higher velocity, meaning these notes are coming out much louder than these notes. That's represented by these little red notes here. And since this section is supposed to be full and kind of the biggest part of the track so far, I'm going to go ahead and select all of these notes and bring the velocities up because I don't want them to get lost. And now that I'm hearing it in arrangement, I actually don't like this last note of the initial melody. So let's hear it. And say if maybe we were working with a vocalist or something, we would want this section to be longer, maybe double it. I can use these brackets up here and I can make them smaller to just fit this section and click here. And if I right click that, I can duplicate time. And this same principle can actually be used for this entire track. So say I wanted to repeat the structure of this track starting here. If this was sort of like a verse section followed by a short pre-chorus followed by a short hook, I can actually stretch these brackets all the way like this and duplicate this entire timeline. And now, just from a few loops, we actually have the structure of about a 2-minute, 30-second song. So we'll go right from the hook to this original kind of verse section. So now that we've got a very, very basic structure plotted out, we can actually add what I like to call some bells and whistles. So if we open up our browser again, we can go back to the pack, and there are some FX risers in this pack. And I think we can use both of these, even though they're quite loud initially in my ears. And let me show you how. So let's use this one, which is more of a fade up version. And let's have it fade up to our big hit here at bar 17. So I'm going to drop it into the timeline. I'm going to zoom into my timeline. And I'm going to line it up so that maybe the peak of this fade in happens right at bar 17. And now I want to make sure that this isn't too loud. So right off the bat, I'm going to lower this down. Since it's noise, it's going to be quite it's going to stick out anyway. It doesn't need to be louder. I would say it's even still too loud. We're going to see if it's warped, which it is. And since this isn't drums or anything, I'm actually going to switch this warp mode to Complex Pro. I also want to make sure it fades out cleanly. And in Ableton Live, we have these little fades here, which I can use to make it have a nice clean fade out. And I'd actually like to throw some reverb on it as well, just to wash out the sound even more. I will go ahead and turn the decay time up, which makes that reverb tail much longer. It's in seconds here. That's what this value represents. And I can turn the dry wet up as well. Let's play from here. It goes on a little long for my taste, so I'm actually going to shorten this. That's much better. Now, since we duplicated the structure already, I'm actually going to want to copy this over and have that happen over here as well. Let's make sure this lines up. It does. Perfect. And there was one other riser sound there that I wanted to use in the pack. And we could actually throw this on the same track if we don't want to process it differently. Let's hear how it sounds on the other risers track with the reverb and at this volume level. So I'm going to have this happen right at the outset of this second verse. I like it. I'm going to check the same thing on the warping though, and I'm going to change it to complex. And it is a little long for my taste, you know? Shortened it up a bit, gave it a fade, but the reverb tail carries on, which is why I like to add the reverb there. I want to add that riser to the beginning of the track as well. So I'm just going to copy this version and paste it here at the beginning, but I actually want to grab like somewhere towards the end. I don't want that initial hit sound because I want things to sound a little bit different. Let's just do this. It's the beginning of the track, so I don't want the FX sound to be too aggressive. I think that's pretty cool. One last trick I'll show you here is I'm going to duplicate that sound that I just did. And I'm going to right click on it and crop it so none of the other stuff that was outside the bounds of this loop are there anymore. And now I'm going to reverse it, which instead of making a sound that falls, it's a sound that rises. So we actually created a new riser out of this sound. I'm going to make it pretty short, and I'm going to have it lead up to the first downbeat of the verse. One important clarification here, and I will go ahead and grab this sound and bring it down here, which actually copies the track completely. It doesn't copy what's on the track, but it copies the track's attributes. It copies the volume, and it even copies the effects that's on it. But the purpose of doing this is so that I can turn that reverb off or just delete it. And you'll hear the difference between a riser with reverb and a riser with no reverb. So if I play this, the sound's going to completely cut off here, which is one effect. Another effect is to have it on the reverb track, where the reverb washes away. I like to use a combination of both. So I'm gonna have this one actually fade up and instantly stop as soon as the drums hit. We can use this now later. Let's use it here. Going into the pre-chorus. Later. I'm just putting them in different spots where I see the sections changing so I can add another layer of interest to my track beyond just the musical ideas. Really quick, while we're in arrangement view, it doesn't mean we have to stop adding to our track. I could add new instruments, and I could use pre-existing instruments, to add layers in and record. So an example of that would be here at bar 1, I could press our arrangement record button and record a synth line. So that's a new idea that we hadn't brought over from session view. I can do all the same stuff I was doing before, like quantize. And now, say we were completely happy with that as our track, maybe I would let these chords play out towards the end, bring this melody back here. At the end as well, we'll end exactly how we started. Put this little riser here for what amounts to be a little bit of an outro. And now you want to send this to your friend or send it to another artist you're working with to add a top line on, or even just release it yourself. You can go ahead and set these brackets to however long your track is supposed to be. I like to set it a little bit after so that fade out of all the effects can happen naturally. So this is probably a good endpoint right here, 51. Then I just go to File, Export. Yes, it's fine. Stop the audio. And we can set our file type, sample rate, all that good stuff. If you don't know much about it, you can set it to WAV, hit export, and you're good to go. All right, I hope that this course has enabled you to get started making your own music in Ableton Live Lite, and also hope you enjoyed the sample pack bundled with this course. I only used a few samples that were in the pack, and there are a lot more possibilities with the samples that are left over, in addition to the sounds that are included in Ableton Live Lite. So even though it is a limited version of the software, you can do a lot of things with it and still make great music. My name is Tejo for ADSR, and it's time for you to get started making some music.